Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about the rise of the Ynnari and why the Ynnari will be OP post-balanced Dataslate. So a lot of you may be hearing that and seeing that and thinking, Proxy Hammer, there's no way. A lot of the Ynnari units got nerfed, right? The Ynnkarn got increased by an insane amount of points, basically by 80 points. Shadow Specters are nerfed, Warp Spiders are nerfed, they're way more expensive, and the Dark Eldar units that got cheaper just aren't really going to make up for it. But what I'm going to argue in this video is that because of the circumstances surrounding the Eldar nerfs, the Ynnari are actually going to emerge as one of the strongest factions within Craftworld Eldar and probably going to see a lot of tournament play. So without further ado, let us go ahead and jump right into the video and talk about why I think the Ynnari are going to be OP post-balanced Dataslate. But first, a quick overview of today's video. We're going to be doing a quick rundown on the Ynnari, just letting everyone know what they are and refreshing everybody's memory on that. We're going to be talking about why the Ynnari are going to be very strong post-Dataslate, and lastly, an example of my updated Ynnari list with analysis. So just a quick rundown of the Ynnari. They are a sub-faction of Craftworld Eldar. Yvrain must be your warlord, so that means you cannot have an Autarch as your warlord or any other HQ for that matter. Up to half of your army as a result can be comprised of Dark Eldar units. However, you can't take the Avatar of Cain, Solitaire, or Homunculus Coven units. So, no Talos or Rax and things like this. All right, so why do I think the Ynnari are going to be very strong post-Dataslate? So there's a number of reasons, but basically, I think the first and foremost reason is that most Dark Eldar units got significantly cheaper. So that's one. Two, the loss of the Wraith Knight has created a significant need for strong anti-infantry and large, which the Dark Eldar are very good at via their data sheets. Yvrain is now cheaper than the Autarch Wayleaper, making her a more attractive option in comparison. And lastly, I think MSU plays way better into the Ynnkarn's strength, which it needs with its recent points nerf. So most Dark Eldar infantry units got significantly cheaper. So Scourges got decreased by 10 points, Mandrakes for 5 points, Capelite Warriors got decreased by 10 points, Witches by 20, Beastmasters by 5, Hellions by 10, Reavers by 5, Incubi by 5, and Rax by 5. So all of those infantry units got significant points reductions. As for the Dark Eldar characters that are relevant, Drazar got reduced by 15 points, Lilith got reduced by 20 whole points, and she was great before, and the Succubus got reduced by 20 points. So this actually makes Witches a viable option, right? Because between Witches and, the character that you need to take with them so that they're worth a damn, they're going to be a, net 40-point decrease or, cost reduction, which is pretty good. It means you can get a Witch squad with a Succubus for around 135 points, 145 points, which is pretty good. If you want to go with Lilith, who's even better, it would be, 165 points, which is still a very good cost for 10 Witches and Lilith. Lilith herself is probably just worth taking alone, but, she does improve the damage of the Witches as well. So with all these points decreases, it actually more than makes up for the points increases on the Eldar units that you were using. So if you're using Shadow Specters, if you're using the Ynnkarn, but you're also using a lot of Scourges and Capelite Warriors and things like that, the points differences there will kind of even out a little bit. Now, the next thing that some of you may be thinking or wondering why I put this in here is the loss of the Wraith Knight. So the loss of the Wraith Knight actually has created a significant need for strong anti-infantry and large that's efficient. So the Eldar have a lot of efficient anti-large, but what they don't have is a lot of efficient anti-infantry with a long range. Eldar are still vulnerable to Overwatch, and a lot of Eldar infantry are short-ranged. So a great example of this is Warp Spiders. Warp Spiders, unfortunately, have a 12-inch range. They're very fast, and they make up for it, and they're very good. But if somebody gets a key unit in a good position so that the, Warp Spiders would be overwatched by them, it could be bad news for the Warp Spiders. Fortunately, with the Dark Eldar units, Splinter weapons have a 24-inch range, so are pretty, good at kind of keeping outside of that Overwatch range. And they have Anti-infantry 3+, which is better than standard shuriken catapults against most infantry. Most shuriken catapults against infantry are going to wound on 4+. If they're toughness 3, it's going to be 3+, which is just the same, so there's no difference there. Splinter weapons also just have longer range. They have 24-inch range, so they're a little bit, again, like I said before, resistant to Overwatch. And while shuriken weaponry isn't the best at scoring any kind of criticals, splinter weapons can be especially lethal when combined with a Bladestorm stratagem for -2 AP on all wounds caused. And again, anti-infantry keyword procs critical effects on wound, not just the 6 to wound. So basically you're getting -2 AP on all of your wounds and not just your 6s, which makes them extremely deadly against infantry units. Also, your Yvrane is now cheaper than an Autarch Wayleaper. So an Autarch Wayleaper is still really good, don't get me wrong, but if you're uncomfortable paying the 115 points for it, you can easily just slot in your Yvrane instead and convert your army into a Ynnari list. Now that your Yvrane is cheaper, she's arguably a better value when compared side by side. And lastly, MSU plays much better into the Yncarne's strengths, which it needs with its recent points nerf. So the Yncarne got a huge points nerf, and what that means is that it's going to be much harder to get value out of the Yncarne now. The Yncarne is very good in most of my games. It makes up for its points cost, even at 350, but even so, you need to slot it into a list that synergizes well with them. So MSU style armies work much better with them because obviously when you have multiple small units, you have more teleportation options. More of your units are throwaway units, so you can use them more aggressively and set up your Yncarne for some really awesome teleports in the enemy's backfield or into a place of safety on the other side of the battlefield. Wherever you want, really, right? That kind of gives you more options as to what to do. And since the Wraith Knight is gone now, which was, basically the Yncarne's best friend prior to the nerfs because of the towering rule. So essentially what people were doing was they were using the Wraith Knight to kill an enemy unit in the backfield turn 1, teleport the Yncarne there. The Yncarne would destroy another unit, charge in, and basically just annihilate a whole bunch of the enemy army in turn 1. So huge alpha strike potential. However, that combo is gone, and the replacement for it, which is the double Night Spinner, isn't quite good enough against enough targets to warrant using it against every single opponent, right? Not every opponent is going to have a unit in their backfield that is killable with 2 Night Spinners alone. As they're really bad against vehicles and against heavier infantry, they do kind of struggle a little bit. They, can probably kill a squad of 5 Marines, but a savvy opponent won't put a squad of 5 Marines into a place where the Yncarne can easily just teleport and then annihilate his army, right? That is if the opponent is paying attention. So that also means that, the MSU style of the Ynnari is an advantage and, a boon for the Yncarne. Okay, so this is my Ynnari list post Dataslate. I have had to change a few things. I made a few tweaks to the list to make it more efficient. And basically, here's what I think would probably be a pretty efficient list going into, the next 3 months. So this list is a 2,000 point Ynnari strike force. As for my characters, I start off with a Death Jester with Fate's Messenger. I love this guy because he can take out units of 5 Marines very easily, making a great teleport target for the Yncarne. Again, he's small, he's hard to hit, he's very frustrating, and that works well with the Ynnari army in general. The Yncarne, of course, is in there. The Yncarne is key to this list. He's the hard hitter, he's the powerhouse of the list that kind of can teleport anywhere he wants to and place a lot of pressure on your opponent. And the Yncarne, unfortunately, is really one of those models that you have to be a good player to use well. So if you are a newer player and want to use the Yncarne, I definitely recommend doing some practice games with him, doing some, 2,000 point games with a friend and just kind of learning how he works, or maybe even just setting up a board by yourself, putting some, proxy models on the other side of the battlefield or something like that and, trying them out, testing them out, stuff like that, getting some practice in, because he is a difficult model to master. I also, of course, have Yvrane in the list. She is the Warlord, and she has just basically her, anti-infantry devastating wound stuff. So she is really good. She's actually one of the characters who wasn't too affected by the devastating wounds nerf because her damage on her ranged weapon is 1 anyway, so it's not really that big of a deal. I do also have a Wave Serpent in the list with Shuriken Cannons, and this is just to transport Yvrane and the troop of 11 Harlequins she's with. I also do have a Venom in the list, and this will be carrying 5 Cabalite Warriors. Usually what I do is I split the Cabalite Warriors up. I have the ones with the splinter rifles, just, there to take objectives and make objectives sticky. And I have the heavy weapon, special weapon, and all the rest of them in this thing to provide fire support. As for my other data sheets, I have 2 units of Rangers. Now these are for board control purposes and also just, to block enemies off. But they're also great trading pieces if I want to get the Incarn out early. So great thing that I love to do with these guys is put them up on an objective early on in the game, kind of bait my opponent to shoot them, and then of course, bring the Incarn out if my opponent makes that mistake and wreak havoc. However, if my opponent doesn't make the mistake and doesn't shoot them, then they get to live, right? And they get to hold that objective. So either way, it's kind of like a win-win for me. It gives me some board control and also gives me some options on bringing the Incarn out early in the game. I also have 2 units of Shadow Specters. So just like before, they're there for anti-Terminator and basically anti-Horde. This list does do well against infantry, but it does lack blast. So these guys have blast. So against big guardsman squads or big orc squads and stuff like that, these guys can really do a lot of damage. I do also have a minimum unit of Shroud Runners to synergize with the anti-infantry elements of my list, give things lethal hits, which does also work with Dark Eldar units. I have a troop of 11, so lead player, and 10 players as well. For some reason, the points didn't really update. I don't know why, but it's supposed to be, I think, 180, if I'm not mistaken. So do keep that in mind. There's 10 players and a lead player, so 11. And they are armed with 4 fusion pistols, 4 Nero disruptors, and of course, maximum Harlequin special weapons. These will go with Yvraine. They're a very tough bodyguard for her, and they're really good at cracking through Death Stars and stuff, especially since Yvraine has some really serious anti-infantry devastating wound damage. For my Dark Eldar units, I have 10 Cabalite Warriors. This time I chose to go with the Splinter Cannon and Shredder for extra Bladestorm synergy. I have a Ravager with 3 Dark Lances, of course. Now, the Ravager did get increased in cost, unfortunately, by 20 points, but it is still one of the most efficient anti-large platforms that we have access to. So I did pick one of those up as well. I also have 2 units of 3 Reavers. They also got a points decrease, so they're even more efficient now. Basically, just gave the Arena Champion the Heat Lance and the Cluster Caltrops, as well as an Agonizer. So the Agonizer makes him better in combat. Cluster Caltrops allow you to reroll their special ability when they move over enemy units to deal mortal wounds. So you get a reroll on that. So you get a little bit more efficiency with that, and a Heat Lance, of course, for that extra anti-tank punch. And both of these units are also going to be engaging units in close combat, trying to proc, their own death, their own demise, so to speak, so that the Incarn can come out and absolutely wreak havoc. But at the same time, Reavers are also great at secondary objectives because they have assault weapons, and they're also just great at harassing lighter units and engaging units in close combat. And now for the last part of my list, I did consider running Scourges with Splinter Cannons, however, I ended up just running them with the Heat Lances instead. So I have 1 unit of Scourges with Heat Lances and 2 units with Dark Lances. The Dark Lances are in the back. They're really good at shooting, and of course, anti-large, right? They do hit on 4+, which is a little bit iffy, but with that extra reroll via the Unparalleled Foresight, they usually do okay. And typically, even if you're going against a vehicle that pops smoke or something like that, 2 of these units firing at that, vehicle that pops smoke is usually enough to kill it. The Heat Lances, of course, are more of a mid-board anti-tank or anti-large unit, and I usually like to use these guys more aggressively, move them up the board early behind some obscuring terrain, and then dare my enemy to come out of cover. And yeah, that's basically the list. So the list is really good at a lot of things. I think for one, it's really good at being able to be versatile and adaptable. It has a lot of objective play, and it also has a lot of synergy with the Incarn. It has a whole bunch of damage, and especially when you consider the multiple small units coming together and ganging up on a single target, a Death Star or something like that, it can really do a lot of damage. So the list has high damage, high mobility, and has a lot of potential to play mind games with your opponent. The only thing I have considered changing out is 1 unit of Reavers for a unit of Mandrakes. So it is something that I have thought about. I have thought about switching out, Reavers for Mandrakes and kind of playing even more mind games on my opponent. But for this particular list, I decided to stay with the Reavers. I just really like Reavers, by the way. Reavers are one of my favorite Dark Eldar units, so I just decided to, keep them in the list. Okay, so in conclusion, I think the Ynnari are looking in a prime position to do some serious work in the competitive scene, post-balanced Dataslate, and I have to say I'm really digging it. I think the Ynnari are in a really good place right now with the Dark Eldar buffs, and the Eldar nerfs didn't really affect them as much. The Ynnari nerf was felt, but I feel like that's easily offset by the buffs that the Dark Eldar got. And therefore, the Ynnari nerf is, in my opinion, more of a craft-rolled Eldar nerf, in that they wanted to nerf it in certain craft-rolled Eldar builds, and not so much a Ynnari nerf, right? Because it is offset by the buffs that the Dark Eldar unit got. And I think also that the need for more MSU units means we're going to see more Ynnari than ever before, which I'm really happy to finally see. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and thank you to all my patrons who have supported the channel over the last months. Your help has helped the channel grow considerably and made the channel better. If you do want to become a Patreon supporter, I have free trials activated, which gives you permanent access to our Discord community, which is a community of Eldar players and enthusiasts who like talking about strategy, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description, as well as the links for my Amazon affiliate page and my channel store page. So if you want to grab some Eldar-inspired apparel or some discount Eldar miniatures on Amazon, go ahead and check out the links in the description. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one, everybody. See you later.